Alright, I'm going to be teaching you lighting in a very fast, condensed course in the hopes that you will understand it without fully understanding it. In other words, to learn lighting in Maya, we're in a game design course, so it's really important to understand lighting and the game engine. In Maya, there's so many rules that we can break in Maya. We can turn on such fancy renderings that it'll make it amazingly realistic. But what I'm going to do is keep this grounded in the world of game design as much as I can. Alright, so let's kind of look at the lights first that we will be using for this. And to do that, I'm just going to grab a square. You don't have to do this, you just have to sit back and relax for a little bit and take notes. Just keep it in mind that you're going to probably be referring to this video a lot in the future. So what I'm doing here is just ripping apart a box. That way I can kind of show lights. Alright, so rendering. Here are the lights that we're going to be using. We're actually only going to be using the directional light, the point light, and the spotlight. Okay, these are very common lights among game engines alike. There is another one called ambient. I'm not going to go into the ambience of things because we're doing a night scene. But let's look at these three lights. I'll choose this one first. It's the most complex. Okay, so here's how you view your lights. If you hit 7 on the keyboard and then you go high quality rendering, you'll see the light. Okay. Right now, since this is a spotlight, it has a penumbrum, and the penumbrum states that the outside edge is very sharp. If you click here, you'll go into the properties of the lights, and this one has a lot more properties than most. It has the penumbrum angle, cone angle, and drop off. Okay, so let's kind of look at what these all mean. Let's say I take the light and I rotate it. Alright, now a light would never be this crisp unless it was very, very, very bright. We'll think of this as a flashlight, but even a flashlight would have a drop off. So let's talk about energy for a second. By saying drop off, it means from the area of the light to the wall, the energy will quickly die as it hits the wall, and only the center is going to survive the brightness. Okay, when we're talking about penumbrum angle and cone angle, I'm talking about this. Light still stays bright, still maintains the same energy, it's just on the outside edge of the flashlight, it's diffused. So it starts to look like this. And to even get further diffused, notice that it still has a crisp edge, then it gets rounded. But if I up the cone angle, then up that, and just a hint of drop off, this becomes a very nice soft light. Alright, now every light has the same properties for shadows. So we're going to quickly go into shadows. I'm just going to choose a ball here. If I want a shadow up on the wall, I can just click on the light and then go down here below to shadows. We have depth map shadows, which we're not going to be using. We're going to be using ray trace shadows. Alright, now if I go to render this, I can see the shadow, or if you have a good video card, you can also click on shadows. And then we can adjust the shadows by choosing these options. Now no matter what I do here, the shadow isn't going to change much. These are post effects. In other words, you have to render them in order to see them. So it's a non-linear system. In order to see what these levers do, we have to go in and choose the display. Okay, I'm going to be using Mental Ray. Notice Mental Ray is not located in here, so I'm going to be using Window, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager. And if you page down, you'll have Maya Add to More. Put a checkbox there and there. Close that out. In the next unit, we'll be looking at using Mental Ray to bake in shadows. But for right now, we're using Mental Ray to render the scene. Alright, now we can drop this down. Mental Ray shows up. You'll see a slew of freaking tabs appear up at the top, and amongst them is quality. You'll see a huge lag time between me clicking on this and it actually doing something too. There we go. Alright, we're going to do production quality. It's by default the best. And what that does is put a checkbox in individual places all over the place, including the ones in Ray Trace, where Ray Trace shadows are. So by dropping that down, we now have inadvertently changed all the settings that we need throughout the entire process of tabs and everything. I'm just going to put this on my other monitor. And then we're going to look at an IPR. So IPR is like this. If I want to render out this scene, I could just click and drag across, and it will only render this small area. As I adjust something, it will automatically adjust the render. So in this case, if I want to mess around with shadows on that light, just have the light highlighted, go to shadows, and I'm just going to adjust these until I get a shadow. Now that's a really crisp shadow right there, and as I go up in value here, it stays crisp, it just gets darker. As I adjust this one, you'll notice it blurs. So the difference here is it might be a ball made out of solid steel, or it might be a tennis ball, in which case you would get the fuzzy outside. Other things blur the shadows too, but we won't get into that. Okay. Now if I needed to move the light, I could take it and I could move it. I could rotate it. I can move it up. And it'll automatically adjust IPR. Alright. If I wanted to render the entire scene out, I could just click this button and it will undo IPR and do its own thing. So now it'll render the entire scene, and that's it. So this little scene is very easy to render because it's just not much but a ball and the shadow. Alright, one other thing I want to show is the quality of render. So if you drop this down, we have common, and under common we have the resolution settings. Right now the resolution is set to 640 by 480, which is very low. When you are done with something, you should always render it at the maximum quality. For the maximum quality of this class, we're going to be using full 1024. Or, wait, actually, no, HD 1080 is what we're going to be using. Don't change this until you're ready though, because watch what happens. It takes forever. This scene, not too bad, but if you do that to the scene with all the textures onto it, you're going to be waiting for quite some many minutes. Alright. Now, we'll get into the other lights, but really the lights all are about the same. In other words, I can go into point light, and point light has just about every property on there except for the penumbrum angle and everything else, but the shadows stay true. I can go into shadow, and I can choose ray tracing shadows. And I can adjust it to do that. I could probably get rid of this one and use the new point light. Okay. Now, in order to see the shadows, we have to turn shadows on. And with a point light, it's really hard to see the shadows, even if you get it all tweaked up. Yeah, the shadows are really soft. Now, if you go to render this, now for the point light, you can now see the shadows. It's on my, since it's a really big render, it's going to take a minute, and then I get this. So there's the shadow. This is displayed at a 1:1 ratio. In order to get the true resolution, we have to go to real size. If you don't do that, you'll get a lower resolution picture that you save out. And incidentally, if you wanted to save these, you can just go File, Save Image, and save it in any format known to man. Alright, so there's Basic Light 101. Let's go on to rendering effects.